Greetings ladies and gentlemen, TugaAvenger here, and for the first time since the launch of Ace Combat 7, we have our first significant patch featuring gameplay changes. And though we're all focused on the Raven right now, and I'll be doing a thorough analysis of it later, these changes are just as important to look at. So, let's break them down, shall we? The first change does not come with the patch proper, but comes alongside it. A significant number of additional Thrustmaster Hota's joysticks is now supported, rather than just the paltry 4 that were supported at launch. This is still a gated environment, closed off to other brands, but it is an improvement on the poor situation we had. Anyway, on the patch notes proper. The minor bug fixes can go without a mention. What's interesting is the balance changes they've listed below. First, 4 special weapons have had their loadouts increased, 3 for being presumably underused, and the pulse lasers because while they're extremely powerful, the Su-57 absolutely dominates over its other 2 platforms. Thanks to Lemmy for crunching the numbers. While those payload changes are easily quantifiable, the others not so much. The 5 affected weapons maintain the same range and power. Their differences lie in their homing capability, which as you'll surely understand is very difficult to test for. From my empirical observations, all of these have slightly improved homing capability. However, I do not have solid data to quantify this. Meanwhile, the nerf to QAMs is simply phenomenal. Not just because, or not even mostly for its necessity, but because of how it was done. The homing capabilities were not nerfed. In fact, there's some anecdotal reports they may have been slightly buffed. What they did was reduce the reload speed, the flight endurance, so we can't just loop all day long around you, even with the ramjet part, and they reduce the off-bore sight angle you can lock on from. What does this mean? It means if you follow your enemy, if you wait for an opportunity to fire your QAM, this change will not affect you in any way whatsoever. This is a direct nerf to QAM spamming while staying defensive all the time. This is balance done right. I bow to you, Project Aces, this is how it needs to be done. The final listed change is a buff to the level 1 armor part. It is effective in campaign. High-tier aircraft with it equipped now only take 20% damage from a missile in ace mode. The level 2 part does not seem to have been directly buffed, but it was indirectly. And now we enter the unlisted changes. Because EML damage has been nerfed. High defense aircraft, that is to say, the F-22, Su-57, XO2 and the DLC aircraft now only take 50% damage from EML with level 2 armor. This was an absolutely necessary nerf. EML was, and I reckon even after the nerf still is, extremely powerful for the effort required to use it. As with the hitbox part, it is very lenient, especially up close. Not to mention that, as a direct fire one-shot weapon, it inherently lacks counterplay. If the enemy has a shot, there are no tactics, there is no evasion, there is no maneuvering, no matter how good you are. Level 2 armor is now the counter. As a 2-shot weapon, it now allows for reaction. On lower tiers though, especially 2000, nothing changes. The EML damage nerf is not the only thing that calls for the use of armor now. TLS has been buffed in damage and hitbox. There is a question if this was even an intended buff, as it may have been only intended for the Raven, but it applies to everyone. And makes it a slightly more viable weapon for single player, but it makes it a lot more dangerous for multiplayer. Some players could already use it with alarming effectiveness. I predict their number will increase by a lot. The other laser weapon wasn't so lucky. The pulse lasers have received a range nerf, down from around 5500 meters to 5000. This is basically meaningless for multiplayer. For single player though, it will make a few score records harder to reach. A more meaningful change was given to the HPAAs. They received a damage buff, up from 3 times normal missile damage to 4 times. This makes them even more consistent for multiplayer, and make them a very efficient option for single player. Being able to perform one-shot kills on a couple of hardened targets, like the small propellers on the Arsenal Bird, members of Soul Squadron, and even the ADF-11. which I won't lie, is extremely satisfying. I may have just found a new favorite single-player weapon. And yet, that's still not my favorite change. I left that one for last. The cannons of European and Russian aircraft have been buffed. They differ from the mostly American rotary cannon ones because they have a slower rate of fire but higher damage. But the Vulcans were still superior overall. Has that changed? Well, here's the thing. I subjectively feel an improvement. A higher rate of fire, better consistency, whatever you want to call it. Everyone I've talked to reports exactly the same. And yet, on my testing, I could only detect at most a difference of 14 rounds per minute. That is just outside my margin of error. So there is in fact a buff, but it's so minute that I'm left wondering if we actually detected it or this was just a case of collective paranoia or placebo effect that just happened to be true. Whatever the case, the damage per second of both types of cannon is now almost exactly the same. And good lord, did I spend way too much time testing this out. And I believe that is it. A good patch, all in all. Most of these changes are positive, none of them is too overbearing. Perhaps the TLS will be too strong after this, but we'll just have to see. In any case, thanks for watching, and until next time, fair winds.